Digital marketplaces have been around for a long time, and if you own a smartphone, a video game console, or even a smart TV, it's very likely that you've made a purchase on one of these digital stores. But what happens if those digital stores get closed for good? Let's talk about it. Now, when it comes to gaming, more and more games are being sold digitally versus physically, and physical meaning like a cartridge or like a disc. According to an article in Ars Technica, nearly 90% of all game sales in 2021 were digital game sales, and that's up from 75% in 2018, only a couple years ago. And you might even ask, does this really even matter? Well, the problem is that these companies are pushing more for digital games because digital games cost a lot less to manage. You don't have to imprint them on a disc. You don't have to put them on a cartridge, especially like in the Switch. The cartridge is actually really expensive to purchase. So even if you do buy a game physically, there are times where the developer just put a code in the box for you to download the game because it's a lot easier and a lot cheaper than to put it on one of these cartridges. Now, for some people, only buying digital games really isn't a big deal. For me, I only buy my games off the Microsoft Store on the Xbox itself. It makes it really easier. I don't have to maintain the discs and the cases and all that thing is really the lazy point of me not having to get up, walk all the way over to the Xbox cross room and change the game every time I want to play a new game. I know, it's lazy, but it is really convenient that way. And Microsoft's been using the same digital stores for the longest time. So I've had an account with Xbox Live for, I don't know, I think it's like 20 years at this point. I've had it since a year after it originally came out. I've had the same account. All the games I've bought throughout the years are on that same account. Don't have to repurchase anything, which is really not the same thing for Nintendo. They only just recently started a Nintendo ID kind of account, so maybe in the future they'll continue to allow you to buy games using that one account. And if you have a Switch or whatever comes after the Switch, that you can just keep buying these games and owning the licenses with this single account, like you can on Microsoft systems. And, Sony seems to be kind of going the same way. So that really does help this digital age, but the issue with licensing and things like that, it makes this really difficult to really recommend people downloading digital games versus buying the actual disc or cartridge. And Nintendo's been in the news lately because they are closing up some of their eShops. Nintendo did tweet about this recently, and they explained some dates on their process for this eShop closure. So according to the tweet, on May 23rd, so this past May, a couple months ago, you can no longer add funds to your eShop account using a credit card. Now, if you have eShop gift cards, even if you buy them today, you can still add them. The next date they show is August 29th, so this coming August. You won't be able to add funds using those gift cards anymore. So if you do buy gift cards, add them as soon as possible, because as of August 29th, you won't be able to add any more funds using an eShop gift card. So even after August 29th, they did say that if you bought a game at a store like a digital code like Amazon or Target or anything like that, you bought the digital code, you can still redeem those until the next date they mentioned, which is March 27th of 2023. Now on March 27th, 2023, you will no longer be able to add games using a digital code that you've already bought. So if you still have funds by March 27th, at that date, you will no longer be able to purchase any games using those funds. That will be no longer valid. They do say, though, that from March 27th into the foreseeable future, they will still allow you to download games that you've already bought. So if you bought these games on your 3DS, your Wii U, you could still download these games for a while after that, but they didn't provide any dates on when that might be shut down. And now, unfortunately, it seems like it's something that might happen in the near future. Maybe 5 years down the road, maybe 10 years down the road, Nintendo might close out those eShops completely, and then you'll lose access to those games for forever. And all that's really terrible, but another big issue is that the Wii U and the 3DS they're really some of the first places where smaller developers were able to release their games that wouldn't be able to before, because they could just throw those games on the eShop. You could buy them, download them, play them. You don't need to have the money to put up front to put those games on a disc or a cartridge. And now with the Wii U shop closing, there's hundreds and hundreds of games that you will no longer be able to be purchased. Those developers will no longer be able to make money off those games. And once those games can no longer be downloaded, like 5 or 10 years in the future, like I mentioned before, those games unfortunately will just disappear forever. And that's a really big problem, because some of those developers, they may not exist anymore. They may not be around to re-release that game on Switch. So we may lose a ton of games. We'll never see them ever again. Now, Nintendo's not the only company that's having this issue. Sony actually announced recently that they were going to close the PlayStation 3 and Vita shops, and they were met with a lot of criticism by their customers, and rightfully so. They backpedaled a bit and changed their mind. They decided to keep those game stores open for the foreseeable future, and it was really a smart move. Back in August of last year, Sony announced that they were no longer going to be selling movies or TV shows through the PlayStation Store. Now, they did say that if you had already made purchases, that you could still continue to download and watch those movies and TV shows. Issue is, though, that some studios like Lionsgate and others have backed out of that licensing, and so Sony has lost access to those movies. So if you bought a movie from Lionsgate or a couple of other studios that they've lost the licensing for, you can't watch those movies anymore. You can't download them anymore. If you already had them in the system, it's possible that they won't even let you play them anymore, because Sony no longer has the licenses. And that's one of the big issues with these digital stores, is that you don't really own the content that you buy. You're really just kind of like leasing the access until that company decides that they're no longer going to provide it. And unfortunately, to be realistic, there are games that where the developer wasn't ready and the publisher pushed the game through anyway, and it did release. And even if it did come on a physical cartridge, the game might have bugs that are game breaking that won't even allow you to complete the game. You have to download a software update to even get to the point where you can complete the game. And if that store is closed and you can't get that update, these games are just broken and you can't even play them anymore. You want to hear about why people were really pissed off at EA recently? You can click on that video right here, and I'll see you on the next one.